Is now a good time to buy a property in Ireland, whether you're a mover, first time buyer, or investor? In this video, we'll take a look at the current landscape of the housing market. I think this is a question that is always on people's mind, especially in Ireland, because there is a housing crisis. It always feels like, is now a good time, or should I wait to see if there'll be a crash? And it really does depend on whether, as I mentioned, you're a first time buyer, a mover, or you're an investor. So let's take a look at some of the current statistics in today's market, and then we'll jump into a couple of my thoughts on basically the state of the property market right now. So officially, year on year, prices are cooling off a little bit. We've seen a 1.2% drop in house prices compared to this time last year. And that's nationwide. Dublin seeing more of a 0.6% drop there, which is very little to be quite honest. But it's worth noting just in the sense that things may be cooling off slightly in the sense of prices rising rapidly. However, if we look at prices from 2019 to 2025 now, they're still up 25% on that. So it's been quite a jump in those couple of years. And what this all comes down to basically is supply and demand. There's a lot of demand and there's very little supply. In 2024, we had new home completions around 32,000, which is 18,000 off the 50,000 that was targeted. And in 2025, we're already down 8.5% year on year on where we were last year. So while we're in the middle of a housing crisis, pretty much one of the only ways to get out of it is to build more housing. And when it comes to that, we're failing as a country in terms of being able to build enough housing to anyway meet the demand. Okay, so let's take a look at interest rates now. The current ECB rate is 3.25% in August 2025, and that's coming down from 4% this time last year. But just because the ECB rate is 3.25, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be able to avail of that rate. For the most common one, which is a fixed mortgage, the 3-year fixed mortgage rates are currently around 4.05%, and then for the 5-year fixed mortgages, we're looking at about 4.35%. And just to give you an idea of how much 1% can be a difference in terms of cost of a mortgage, let's take an example where you're borrowing 400,000 for 30 years and you're paying a 3% interest rate. This payment will work out at 1,686 per month, with the total cost of credit being around €207,000. Now let's add that 1% in, and you're looking at, for the same amount of money over the same period of time, €1,909 per month, so nearly €300 extra there. And then the cost of credit goes up 80,000 as well at 287,000. So 1% in this context does make quite a difference over the course of the mortgage. And even on a monthly basis, as I said, 1% is kind of like €250 in this example. So now let's come down to some of the examples in terms of first-time buyers, movers, and investors. I'll actually start with the investors first, and please keep in mind these are my own thoughts. Make sure you do all your own research in terms of your own situation and what makes sense for you. But personally, putting myself in the shoes of an investor in property in Ireland, here are my thoughts. For me personally, I wouldn't buy property as an investment in Ireland right now, given the current climate. Unless you're in a position to potentially buy the property outright, in that situation it may make sense. But ultimately, especially if you're buying a second-hand home, you're going up against the likes of families and couples that are desperate to get a home, and they're willing to pay well above the asking price, and we've pretty much seen that across every county in Ireland. Whereas for you as an investor, you have to have your ROI, your return on investment, in mind when you're putting in these bids. So for example, at 400,000, maybe you're making a 5 or 6% profit, but then if you go up to 450,000, that starts to diminish. So for you as an investor, every 1,000 or every 10,000 is really eating away at your profits and the likelihood that this deal will come out well. Whereas for a family or a couple that are trying to buy that property, an extra 10,000 or 15,000, if it means them getting their dream home or just a home in general, they're going to be willing to put that money down. So again, I'm not saying you can't find a good deal, maybe especially outside of Dublin in terms of property to invest in, but unless you have a lot of money and can buy the property outright and already have your own home sorted, for me personally, investing in property in Ireland right now is a pretty tricky game. So let's take a look at first-time buyers. I mentioned them in that investing scenario. I think ultimately what it comes down to again is all of your situations. If you're currently renting in the likes of Dublin, you can be paying for, let's say, a one bed over €2,000 in most cases. And it may very well work out that if you do manage to get a mortgage, especially if you manage to get a new build, which we'll talk on in a minute, you may very well end up paying less than that and obviously building towards your equity in the home as well. The issue obviously lies then in terms of, especially if you're a single person, it's near impossible to get enough money in the likes of Dublin and these bigger cities in Ireland to be able to actually get a mortgage on your own. So in most cases, you need to kind of have someone else to go in the deal with you, a partner or whoever else. And as well as that, even though you do have 4 times your gross salary limit in terms of what you can be lent by the bank, they do apply some rigorous stress testing where they can apply up to 2 percentage points above the interest rate that you're requesting, just to stress test if you'll be able to pay back that loan. So it can be incredibly difficult, especially if you're kind of a middle income or low income earner. And I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom. Ultimately, it is hard and very, very hard for a single person, but if there is 2 of you going into a property, it definitely is possible, especially in the other counties outside of Dublin, but even in Dublin, it can can be possible to get your hands on a property. There are some benefits out there that some people agree with and some people don't, but the likes of the Help to Buy scheme, where you can get €30,000 towards your deposit, in some cases may potentially cover all the deposit. Again, that's not likely in Dublin here, but you can get €30,000. So let's say you're buying a place for 500,000. If you and your partner have paid €30,000 in tax over the last 5 years, you'll be able to get that 30,000 off the revenue to be able to put towards your purchase. Meaning in that case, while a 10% deposit would be 50,000, revenue will provide you with 30,000 and basically in the tax that you paid back, and then you only need to come up with 20,000 to get into that €500,000 home. Now I will leave link down in the description below details of the Help to Buy scheme if it's your first time hearing about it. There are some stipulations in there that it must be your primary residence, and then that also that you need to stay there for 5 years minimum, so I'll leave that details down in the description below. There's also the First Home scheme, which again I'll link down in the description below, but it's essentially a way that the government can take a stake in your home. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but it may come in handy in whatever situation that you're in. So ultimately, if you're a first time buyer, I think most of the time it's a good time to buy. It's very impossible to predict when a crash is going to happen, despite it looking like maybe some people are saying we're in a bubble and the bubble will burst. It's very difficult when the supply is low and the demand is high to see any sort of pullback here, or any sort of major pullback. As I said, prices are generally cooling off, but they're still up quite a bit since 2019. And again, that really falls down to supply. If we got a big influx in supply, we'd probably start to see prices come down. But again, with the rates that we're currently at in terms of building, and the fact that we're already behind in 2025 in terms of building new homes, it's not really looking like it's going to come to, I could be wrong of course, as I said, it's impossible to predict, but at the moment it's very, very hard to say if there's going to be a crash and it's worth waiting to buy your home. So if you are a family, you are a couple, and you're really eager to get your own home, and you see a deal that makes sense for you and is affordable, then it very well may make sense for you to buy a property right now. One thing I would say is if you are going in terms of a second-hand house and you do see yourself getting into bidding wars, try to stay consistent in terms of a price that you're willing to pay. It's very easy to get sucked in. Let's say you have, for example, the property's 400,000. You end up saying we're going to pay 450 max. All of a sudden you've put 445 and another person comes in and does the 450. The fact you're already technically in it for 445, you're more likely to push a little bit further, go to 455, and then all of a sudden you get the place for 475,000. So try have your limits in there, or even miss out on it for that, but try have your limits in there in terms of here's what we feel that it's worth, and then we're going to stick with that, and maybe a small bit of leeway, but ultimately try not to get sucked into these bidding wars and ending up feeding that price and ending up paying a huge amount for something you feel is not worth it. And then for movers, we'll say you're selling your own home. While you may actually get more for the home that you're selling, given the current kind of prices skyrocketing, I guess, it can benefit sellers. But then ultimately those sellers will likely be buying a new place, in which case they'll probably pay over the asking for that too. So it's kind of like a chain reaction of just overpaying. So again, depends for movers. Personally, if I was in a place that I was happy with, I probably wouldn't be too eager to move right now. Again, unless a great deal does come up. But ultimately for movers, I think even if you get more for your own property, you're likely going to be paying more for the next property. So again, I'll just give that a very quick summary. For investing right now, I personally wouldn't see it as a good time to invest in property in Ireland. If you're thinking about moving, maybe now's not the best time to move either, unless you are moving maybe outside of the city from, we'll say, Dublin to somewhere that has better value, somewhere in the Midlands or something like that. You may be able to sell your property in Dublin right now for a really good price, and then if you are getting a good deal elsewhere, then that may make sense for you. And again, for first-time buyers, again, depends on your situation, but in most cases, especially in Dublin, you're likely paying more rent than you would if you were paying a mortgage. So it may very well make sense if you can find a property, a deal that works for you and is affordable for you, and it's going to be your home for quite a number of years. They say kind of at least 5 years, because there's obviously a lot of costs that are involved in buying a home, such as your stamp duty, probably furnishing the place as well, and sort of maintenance fees, all sorts of things that come along with it. So it's generally not just the purchase price, there's other costs associated with it. So you'd want to be staying at least those 5 years to kind of make sure that those costs aren't being wasted essentially. And also if you're doing the Help to Buy scheme, 5 years, that's going to be a minimum in terms of allowing you to recoup that full 30,000 from revenue and then not take any back. So that's kind of my outlook at the housing market right now. I would love to hear some of your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know what you're seeing in your area. Personally, for me, across all of Ireland, I've seen house prices being listed, maybe even lower than the houses are worth, just to entice bidders, and end up going for much more over the asking price. I think that's kind of the case across Ireland right now, but I'd love to know your thoughts on how you see the housing market right now and what you think is the right thing to do. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you do subscribe for lots more content, and make sure you like this video as well if you did enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in another video.